Beneath the streets of Paris lies a chamber that appears on no map. By the glow of an oil lamp, two symbols gleam side by side, the red cross of the Knights Templar, and beside it something stranger, a triangle enclosing an eye, but unfinished, as though history paused before completing the design. What does it mean to see these two marks together? Could the brotherhood of Crusader knights, broken by the French crown in 1307, have survived in silence for centuries, re-emerging in the Enlightenment under a new name, the Illuminati? This is the riddle we face tonight. The Templars, guardians of pilgrims and masters of finance, were hunted and scattered on that infamous dawn of October 13th, 1307. Some say they perished in fire and confession, yet others whisper that their treasure, their ledgers, and their oaths escaped, that they sank beneath the surface like an underground river, invisible but still flowing. And if that current never dried, might it have surfaced again centuries later in Bavaria, when Adam Weishaupt founded his secret society of illumination in 1776? So I ask you directly, when a vow is sworn in silence, can it outlive the men who spoke it? Can it change its name, adopt new symbols, and guide new generations, so that what begins as a knightly order ends as a clandestine fraternity accused of pulling the strings of history? Some believe the line is unbroken. The ledger hidden beneath Paris, the fleet said to have vanished from La Rochelle, the maps drawn without ink, the margins filled with coded notes. All of these were steps in a survival that led straight to the Illuminati. Others insist there is no proof, only coincidence and the natural repetition of secrecy. And still others claim the myth itself is the inheritance, that whether or not ships sailed or ledgers survived, the very story of the Templars gave the Illuminati its power. We cannot answer these questions yet, but we will walk the path. We will descend into the Paris vault, where the rose and the acacia bloom in silence. We will stand on the pier of La Rochelle, where ships are said to have vanished into dawn. We will wander the markets where a ledger can be hidden in a pause between numbers, and the libraries where a margin can serve as a vault. And finally, we will open the letters of 1492 and the edicts of 1784 and ask, what truly survived? If such questions stir you, gentle listener, welcome to Serene Myths. Here we explore history's hidden corridors, where fact meets mystery and silence speaks. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and join us as we search for the unfinished thread between the Templars and the Illuminati. The bell above Paris tolls once, its echo sliding downward through the stone, carrying us into the deeper context of the order's rise. The bell's echo lingers in the stone, and we turn back the clock to a time before arrests, before the fall of the Templars. To understand the mystery, we must first understand the world that shaped them. The Knights Templar began as a handful of men sworn to protect pilgrims on the dangerous roads to Jerusalem. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. They were poor, they said, owning nothing but their vows. Yet within a century their red cross was known across Europe, worn by warriors, respected by kings, and feared by enemies. How did a few men become a global order? The answer lies not only in the sword, but in the ledger. By the 12th century, the Templars had devised a system of credit so advanced it resembles modern banking. A pilgrim could deposit his gold in London and withdraw it safely in Jerusalem. Letters of credit replaced heavy purses. Wealth flowed across borders without ever being carried in a saddlebag. Kings themselves borrowed from the order, and merchants entrusted them with fortunes. But what happens when paper and coin are not enough? The Templars learned that the most reliable currency was not metal or parchment, it was trust. They developed signs and gestures, codes and knots, ways of transmitting meaning that no thief could intercept. They discovered that reputation, sealed by oath, could move wealth more securely than armies. So the order lived by a threefold vow: to the brotherhood, to the work, to the balance. 3 promises, as steady as a triangle. Break one, and all would fall. Was this vow merely religious discipline, or was it something deeper, a formula designed to outlast kingdoms? Symbols reinforced these oaths. The rose and the acacia appeared carved into stone. The rose, a sign of secrecy, petals closed around hidden truth. The acacia, a tree of memory, evergreen even in death. Together, they promised survival. A hidden ledger could be burned. A fortress could be seized. But a symbol, a story, an oath, those could pass quietly from man to man, invisible to kings. Imagine medieval Europe. Markets crowded, bells marking the hours, coins clinking in hands. Beneath that noise, another rhythm pulsed. Messages passed not in ink, but in gesture. A merchant adjusting his cloak twice, a baker leaving a loaf with an extra cut, a child singing a rhyme that carried directions disguised as nonsense. These were not accidents. They were the language of survival. And here lies the riddle. When Philip IV of France moved against the order on October 13, 1307, what exactly did he destroy? The castles? Yes. The public power? Yes. But the methods, the vows, the signals, the silent web of trust, could they be destroyed? Or did they sink beneath the surface, waiting to rise again under another name? Think about it. If a network of secrecy is built not on paper but on memory, how do you erase it? If its true wealth lies not in coin but in trust, how do you confiscate it? If its maps are drawn not with ink but with gesture, how do you burn them? Perhaps you cannot. Perhaps what Philip destroyed was only the shell, while the heart continued to beat in hidden chambers, in merchant routes, in whispered vows. And if so, where did that current flow? Some say it trickled into other guilds and fraternities, carrying with it the language of secrecy. Others say it lay dormant until 1776, when Weishaupt and his companions built the Illuminati on foundations older than they admitted. Still others believe the myth itself, of hidden ledgers, vanished fleets, maps without ink, was the true inheritance, shaping later societies who borrowed the story to cloak themselves in ancient power. So I ask you, what truly survived? Was it men? Was it methods? Or was it myth? Above us the bells of Paris toll again, calling soldiers to their orders. Below, in a hidden passage, a clerk presses his hand to the stone, seeking the mark of the rose and the acacia. In his arms he carries the ledger, the silent heart of the order. He kneels, seals it with wax, and whispers the vow. That moment is where our journey through the mystery core begins. The story of how survival moved from page to stone, from stone to ship, from ship to shadow. The streets of Paris echo with boots and shouts. It is the morning of October 13th, 1307. Soldiers move in the king's name, pounding on doors, dragging brothers from their chambers. Above, the city awakens to betrayal. Below, in the veins of stone, a single clerk runs with a burden pressed against his chest. He is young, his fingers stained with ink, his ears trained to hear every echo. Today, he is no mere bookkeeper. He is the guardian of the order's heart, a ledger bound in leather, filled with names, debts, and obligations. A silent treasury more valuable than gold, for it records the promises of kings themselves. He descends into the undercroft, where stone walls sweat with damp. Torches flicker, shadows stretch long. Behind him the sound of iron against wood grows louder. Time is running out. Why this book? Why risk his life for pages of ink and parchment? Because this ledger is more than paper. It is proof of power. It is the invisible chain binding monarchs, merchants, and pilgrims to the order. To lose it is to lose the balance the brothers swore to guard. To hide it is to keep alive the possibility of return. The clerk stops before a mark, a rose entwined with a sprig of acacia carved faintly into the stone. To others, it would mean nothing. To him, it is the key. Rose, secrecy, acacia, memory. Together, they promise survival. He presses the stone and a block slides. Within the cavity, he places the ledger. His hand lingers on the cover, tracing the worn leather. Can these numbers and codes survive the flames that will soon consume his brothers? Can memory itself become the true vault, stronger than any treasury? He seals the stone with wax, pressing it with a small stamp. The rose and the acacia joined. The wax cools quickly, locking the secret away. Outside, bells toll, their sound muffled by stone. In the squares above, white mantles with red crosses are being torn away, their wearers chained. But down here, a heartbeat lingers. This is the moment where the Templar order divides. Publicly, they are broken, arrested, accused, condemned. Privately, in hidden chambers like this, they become something else. An underground current, invisible, carried not by castles or armies, but by vows and memory. Think of it. If an oath is carried in the mind, can soldiers seize it? If trust is the currency, can kings confiscate it? If secrecy is the treasury, can fire destroy it? Perhaps not. Perhaps the true wealth of the Templars was never in their gold at all, but in the vow whispered now in the dark, to the brotherhood, to the work, to the balance. The clerk moves toward an escape passage. Narrow, damp, it carries runoff water from the streets. He squeezes through, scraping shoulders, emerging into the stench of the city's waste. Above him dawn breaks, soldiers march, chains rattle. Yet he walks on, silent, carrying only the memory of what he has hidden. Centuries later, stories of this ledger would surface again and again. Some claim it was moved from cache to cache, always hidden, always sealed by rose and acacia. Others believe it still lies beneath Paris, waiting in silence. Whether true or not, the tale itself became a kind of proof that the order's power was not lost, only concealed. Here lies the paradox. A ledger hidden in stone may one day be found, but an oath carried in silence cannot. Which, then, is the real treasure? The book or the vow? The answer remains uncertain, but the question itself has endured, whispering through centuries, shaping legends of fleets, maps without ink, and societies accused of ruling from the shadows. The clerk disappears into the labyrinth of the city. The wax hardens. The stone breathes. Above, the red cross is torn down. Beneath, the vow endures. And so we move with him, following the hidden current as it flows westward, to a harbor where ships are said to have vanished into dawn, their sails carrying not just men but silence itself. The Atlantic wind cuts sharp at La Rochelle. It is October 1307. The same morning Paris drowns in shouts and chains. Here, at the western edge of France, the harbor groans with ropes and masts. Dock workers roll barrels. Merchants chalk tallies. Sailors curse the tide. On the surface, it is an ordinary day. And yet, whispers claim something extraordinary happened here. The story is simple, and yet impossible to prove. When the king's men moved to destroy the Templars, a fleet of their ships slipped out of La Rochelle under cover of dawn. Some say they carried treasure, gold, relics, even the Grail itself. Others insist they carried only men, ledgers, and vows. By the time soldiers arrived, the harbor was empty, the ships already vanished into the horizon. But is it true? The port records raise questions. In the ledgers of La Rochelle, entries are neat, precise. Dates, names of ships, weights of cargo. Then suddenly, gaps. Blank lines. Spaces where something seems missing. Were these mere errors? Or were they signals? Deliberate silences hiding what could not be written? Think about it. A ship's departure is usually announced by ink, tonnage, cargo, tax. But what if silence itself became the record? What if the absence of words was the proof that something had happened? Could a ledger hide a fleet not by what it says, but by what it refuses to say? Local stories only add to the mystery. Fishermen swore they saw sails rise against the dawn, but no flags flown. The fleet has no flag but its own shadow, one recalled. Words that would echo again in a letter written in 1492. Were these men mistaken? Or did they truly see ships leaving, carrying away the order's heart before it could be seized? And if the ships did sail, where did they go? North to Scotland? South to Portugal? Across the Atlantic centuries before Columbus? Or were they never ships at all, but a legend that gave the broken order an afterlife in imagination? The strange marks around the harbor deepen the riddle. A chalk line drawn at an odd angle. A stonemason symbol carved twice into a piling. Once steady, once hurried. Were these just accidents of work or codes for those who knew how to read them? Could an entire network operate in plain sight, turning docks and ledgers into ciphers? Historians divide sharply. Some dismiss the vanished fleet as myth, invented long after the fact to grant romance to a fallen order. Others argue that the consistency of the tale, repeated in records and in oral tradition, suggests memory rather than invention. After all, why would so many generations repeat the same image, a fleet leaving without flags, if there had been nothing at all? The question is not only whether the ship sailed, but what the story itself accomplished. Even if no fleet left La Rochelle, the legend of departure gave hope to survivors. It said, "The order is not gone, only hidden." And for centuries, that legend provided a vessel stronger than wood, a vessel built of belief. So ask yourself, what matters more, the fleet or the story of the fleet? If men act upon a myth, does the myth not become real in its consequences? If the Illuminati centuries later invoked Templar imagery, were they inheriting reality or the power of legend itself? The tide rises. Chalk marks wash away. Blank spaces in ledgers remain, waiting to be read. And the question lingers in the salt air. Did the ships of La Rochelle ever sail? Or did silence itself carry the brotherhood forward? The gulls wheel above the harbor, then turn inland, their cries fading into the sound of a market bell. Stalls open, coins clink, voices rise, and within the rhythm of commerce another mystery stirs. A map without ink, a network traced not on parchment, but in gestures and memory. The market bell tolls, and the harbor fades behind us. Cobblestones echo with footsteps, stalls creak open, and the town awakens to trade. On the surface, it is a scene of ordinary life, apples piled high, bolts of cloth unfolded, coins ringing in hands. Yet beneath the noise, another rhythm beats, a hidden language, carried not in ink, but in gesture. At a wooden table, an old woman keeps her accounts. Her chalk moves quickly, filling a slate with numbers and columns. To a casual passerby, it is nothing more than simple bookkeeping. But if you look closely, something is off. Certain numbers are spaced wider, as though the chalk hesitated. These gaps are intentional. For those who know the code, the spacing forms a second set of accounts, a secret ledger written inside the public one. Nearby, a baker ties his apron. He adjusts it 3 times before returning to his work. Customers see nothing unusual. But to a courier watching across the street, the message is clear. The road is safe. The delivery may proceed. A child skips rope, singing a nonsense rhyme. To other children, it is just play. Yet the rhyme contains directions, disguised in rhythm. The next meeting will be beyond the town walls, where no soldier would think to listen. This is the map without ink. A network of meaning woven into daily life, invisible to outsiders, but obvious to those taught to see. A loaf of bread with an extra cut, a jar placed upside down, a gesture repeated thrice. These become coordinates on a living map, a map not of roads and rivers, but of trust and silence. But ask yourself, how can such a system survive? Why risk using gestures instead of words? Because words can be seized, ledgers burned, letters intercepted. A pause in chalk, however, leaves no trail. A rhyme on a child's lips cannot be confiscated. When the written word becomes dangerous, memory becomes the safest vault. Consider the resilience of such a network. Armies may break castles, kings may seize treasuries, but how do you confiscate a pause between numbers? How do you outlaw a baker's gesture or silence a market bell? This is what some historians call the golden vein, an underground current of trust, carried in people, not parchment. It flows across borders, invisible but enduring, because it is built into habits, into songs, into gestures repeated without suspicion. Skeptics argue that these stories are exaggerations. Could a few signals really replace ledgers and contracts? Wouldn't memory falter? Wouldn't mistakes pile up? Perhaps. And yet, when we study the survival of oral traditions, songs, proverbs, even entire genealogies, we see how memory can outlast ink. Why should it not serve as currency too? The image grows clearer. After 1307, when the Templars' visible power collapsed, their survival may have depended less on fortresses and more on this invisible network. Each brother became a page of the ledger. Each gesture a mark in the margin. Each memory a treasure chest locked in silence. And if this is true, then the real fleet was not made of ships, but of people. a fleet of living ledgers, sailing across towns and markets, carrying the vow from place to place without leaving a trace. So I ask you, if secrecy itself becomes a map, can it ever truly be erased? Or does it simply shift shape, passing from gesture to gesture, generation to generation, waiting for new names and new faces to carry it forward? The market continues as if nothing extraordinary is happening. Bread is sold, cloth is measured, coins change hands. Yet within this noise, the golden vein pulses. A brother reads the spacing on a chalkboard. Another notes the baker's gesture. A courier hears the rhyme and knows where to walk. The vow lives on, hidden in plain sight. The bell tolls again, its sound rolling across rooftops. To most, it marks the hour. To a chosen few, it signals movement, the time to meet, the time to act. Bells become clocks, but also compasses. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. And so, the map without ink stretches far beyond this market. It connects Paris to La Rochelle, towns to ports, merchants to monasteries. It is not written, yet it exists. It is not seen, yet it guides. It is fragile, yet impossible to seize. The question remains, is this a real system, passed from the Templars to their heirs? Or is it a story told later, to explain how an order supposedly destroyed could still echo through history? The answer may never be certain, but the story itself is powerful. It teaches us that silence can be language, that absence can be proof, that memory can be wealth. The bell fades. The market grows quiet. Shadows stretch across the cobbles, and as they lengthen, they seem to form rows of shelves, a library waiting in the dark. Here, not in markets, but in books, the Brotherhood hides its secrets, in margins, in false maps, in whispers written where no king would think to look. The market fades. The sound of coins and bells dissolves into silence. A heavy wooden door swings inward and the air changes. It smells of dust, ink, and candle wax. Shelves rise on every side, stacked with leather-bound volumes. At first glance, it is only a library, a place of knowledge, of order, of quiet learning. But what if this library is not what it seems? On a table lies a map. Its rivers twist oddly, its mountains lean at impossible angles, and a small village appears where no village should be. To an untrained eye, it is simply a bad copy. But for those who know, this is a Null map. It does not chart geography outside, but geography inside. Each false mountain or misplaced town points to a particular shelf, a specific cabinet. This is a catalog disguised as error, a map of a library, not a land. Now imagine, why would men of secrecy need such a thing? Because what they hid was not in vaults of gold, but in books. A treasury built not of coin, but of margins. Pick up a volume of trade law. Its Latin text fills the page, dense and dry. Yet in the margins, faint scratches appear. A half-drawn rose beside a passage on tariffs. A tiny sun above waves in the corner. To most, these are idle doodles of a bored scribe. But to those who understand, they are entries in a hidden ledger, notes of debts owed, goods exchanged, ships dispatched. In another book, a sermon on virtue carries a mark that makes no sense, a small triangle enclosing an incomplete eye. Why there? Why in that margin? Could this be another page of the vow, concealed inside a text that no soldier or bishop would ever suspect? This is the genius of the library without a map. A parchment ledger could be seized. A hidden cache could be uncovered. But who would think to search for secrets in the margin of a book of sermons, or in a map whose mountains are drawn wrong on purpose? So the question is, do we underestimate the survival of the Templars? Did they truly vanish, or did they transform libraries into vaults, turning scribbles and false geographies into their new treasury? Evidence does exist. In surviving manuscripts from the late Middle Ages, scholars have found odd marks, roses, suns, acacias, drawn without context. Were they simply decoration, or the afterimage of a code now forgotten? And if they are codes, how much of the Brotherhood's business still lies hidden in books, resting quietly on monastery shelves? Historians argue both ways. Some say these are nothing more than the daydreams of scribes. Others believe they are fragments of a hidden language, the same one carried in gestures and markets, now pressed into margins to endure across generations. Which is true? No one can say with certainty. But think of the pattern. Paris held a hidden ledger beneath stone. La Rochelle carried ships that may or may not have sailed. The markets ran on gestures and silence. Now the library itself becomes a treasury. The pattern repeats, secrecy moving from vault to harbor, from harbor to street, from street to page, always changing form, always staying alive. If this system existed, then secrecy itself became an institution, stronger than castles, older than dynasties. And this raises another question. Did Adam Weishaupt and his Illuminati, centuries later, know that they were drawing from the same well? Or did they stumble into methods that had been waiting for them, preserved in books they never realized were ledgers? The candlelight flickers against the shelves. Dust swirls in the air. For a moment, you imagine entire libraries across Europe humming with silent transactions, monks copying scripture while also preserving ledgers, scholars consulting maps that lead not to lands, but to hidden cabinets. Could this really have been possible? Whether true or myth, the idea itself holds power. To believe that libraries contained hidden treasuries is to believe that knowledge itself can be currency, that books can be vaults, that margins can carry vows as securely as stone. A monk closes his book. The candle beside him drips wax, forming a pool that hardens in silence. The flame wavers, and in its shadow the rose sketched in the margin seems to bloom. It is a fragile moment, gone in an instant, yet it whispers of survival. So I ask, if truth and myth intertwine, does it matter which is which? If people act upon the belief that secrets hide in margins, then the myth itself becomes part of history. The monk blows out his candle. Darkness fills the hall, yet the smell of wax lingers, like a thread tying past to future. Out of the smoke rises the shape of another letter, written centuries later, in 1492, when a friar would speak of a fleet with no flag but its own shadow. And from there the trail leads forward, into the age of the Illuminati. The library darkens, shelves dissolve into shadow, and in their place appears a stone monastery on a hill. The year is 1492. A friar bends over a desk, quill scratching across parchment. He pauses, breathes, then writes a line that has haunted centuries. The fleet has no flag but its own shadow. What did he mean? Was he recalling the vanished ships of La Rochelle, said to have slipped into the Atlantic with vows and ledgers aboard? Was he speaking metaphorically, imagining memory itself as a fleet sailing beyond reach? Or was he hiding a message for those who still remembered the oath? This single phrase suggests continuity. It tells us that, nearly 2 centuries after 1307, the legend of a fleet without flags still circulated. But was it fact? Or did the myth itself become the vessel, carrying the Templar vow forward even when evidence could not? Fast forward to Bavaria, 1776. The world has changed. Europe hums with Enlightenment ideals, revolutions stir across the Atlantic, and a professor of canon law, Adam Weishaupt, founds a society he names the Illuminati. Its mission is reform, to spread reason, oppose superstition, reshape the order of society. But why the secrecy? Why the rituals of initiation, the coded signs, the oaths of silence? Why cloak reason in the language of hidden brotherhood? Did Weishaupt invent these practices, or did he inherit them? Critics say the resemblance is superficial. Any secret society will use symbols, passwords, and vows. But others note that the Illuminati's structure, its hierarchies, its emphasis on balance, its obsession with secrecy, echoes the old Templar formula: brotherhood, work, balance. Is this coincidence, or is it survival in disguise? By 1784, Bavarian authorities grow uneasy. Edicts are issued, papers are seized, lodges are raided. One storeroom is searched, and in it, officers report symbols carved into wood, a red cross, and an unfinished eye. Were these mere curiosities, or proof that the Brotherhood had carried its emblems across centuries? Again, the question: are we looking at inheritance or imitation? Did Weishaupt's Illuminati consciously link itself to Templar legend to gain prestige? Or was there a deeper thread tying the two? The crackdown intensifies. By 1785, the Illuminati is declared dissolved, its members scattered, its name outlawed. Historians assure us the society was short-lived, a flicker in the age of revolutions. But if it truly ended there, why does its shadow stretch so long into our present? Why does the word Illuminati still make people whisper? Perhaps because, like the Templars before them, their destruction only fueled the myth. Just as the absence of ships at La Rochelle became proof of survival, so too did the Illuminati's suppression become proof of hidden power. Once again, silence itself became the strongest evidence. So what do we make of this pattern? In 1307, a ledger is hidden beneath Paris. In 1492, a letter speaks of a fleet sailing as shadow. In 1776, a secret order is born in Bavaria. And in 1784-85, it is suppressed. Papers seized. Symbols briefly seen. Fact or coincidence? Survival or reinvention? Some say there is an unbroken chain, that the Templar vow flowed underground for centuries and re-emerged as the Illuminati. Others argue the methods simply converged. Whenever men form secret societies, they rediscover the same tools: oaths, codes, symbols. And still others believe myth itself is the answer, that the legend of Templar survival gave later groups the story they needed, whether or not the reality existed. So the question remains: does it matter whether the chain is unbroken, if the myth itself shaped history? If men believe they are heirs to the Templars, act as if they are heirs, organize themselves in that image, then does the belief not become its own form of truth? The friar's letter curls as the ink dries. The Bavarian edicts crumble into dust. Yet both still speak, not in certainty, but in suggestion. They tell us that silence, myth, and memory are more durable than parchment or stone. The candle of 1492 burns low. Its smoke rises, forming shapes in the air. For a heartbeat, you see the outline of a cross, the shadow of a ship, the curve of an unfinished eye. The images dissolve, but the questions remain. We are ready to enter the realm of debate, but the coast calls us first. Beyond letters and edicts lies another ledger, the shoreline itself, where a red cross rides the wind, and charts learn to speak in blanks. Only after that sea road will we ask what survives, and what is myth we choose to believe. Night cools along the Atlantic coast. Lanterns bob on the quay, their lights slipping over wet planks and coils of rope. In a loft above the harbor, a sail hangs like a pale curtain. A shipwright kneels and paints a crimson cross upon the canvas, arms broad, equal, flaring at the ends. When the wind rises tomorrow, that cross will billow like a standard made of air. The year is early in the 14th century's long aftermath. In Portugal, the properties once held by the Templars have been gathered and given new life under a different banner. A royal decree has forged a successor, the Order of Christ, and with it, a practical solution to a political problem. The methods of the old order survive, but their name does not. Fortresses and farms change hands. Vows change wording. The work continues. In the chart room of a coastal house, pilots lean over portolan maps, their compass roses blooming like flowers of wind. Ropes creak as crates are dragged across the floor. On one lid, a shipping clerk presses a stamp, a small sun over waves, then smears it quickly with oil so the mark will not draw eyes. The habit remains. Business rides under symbols that speak plainly only to the initiated. Fact anchors the scene. In 1319, Portugal refounds Templar holdings as the Order of Christ, granting it lands, incomes, and a place within the realm's ambitions. Over the next century, that order becomes entangled with exploration. Princes govern it. Ships carry its cross. Later, when caravels slip past the headlands, the red emblem on their sails is not the Crusaders' badge as it once was, but the cross of Christ, a new face for old inheritance. Unusual details cling to the edges. In a locked cabinet sits a rudders, sailing directions written in a loose hand, lines of wind and current committed to memory as much as to ink. Next to it rests a wrong chart, islands skewed, distances stretched, an inlet omitted. It is not carelessness. It is policy. Sea routes, like ledgers and letters before them, can be disguised. If a rival steals the map, he will sail into emptiness. Pilots speak softly of a master chart held by the crown, a template from which official copies are taken, each salted with small errors so that leaks can be traced. Silence becomes law. The ocean is a ledger. The kingdom balances it by secrecy. The old lesson repeats itself in a new element. When ink endangers profit, memory is safer than paper. On the quay, bells ring a slow count. A factor folds a letter into oilskin and slides it under a plank. No words mention destinations, only a pattern of dots placed along the margin, a habit learned in markets long ago. A boy hums a tune as he passes the harbor gate. The rhythm marks when a messenger should turn into the alley and when to keep walking. The map without ink is still alive, only now it faces the sea. Consider the continuity. Once, a clerk hid a ledger behind stone in Paris. Later, men argued over ships that may or may not have sailed from La Rochelle. Markets traced routes with gestures. Libraries converted margins into ledgers. Now the coastline itself takes the vow into its grain. Secrecy as infrastructure painted on sails, pressed into the practice of charts, lodged in the habits of pilots. The method migrates from vault to wharf, from parchment to current, from oath to ordinance. Debate stirs even here. Some historians see in the Order of Christ a careful rechartering rather than survival. A legal fiction that preserves utility while severing lineage. The cross on the wind, they say, is not the Templars' emblem resurrected, but a different symbol for a different institution, shaped by royal will and papal sanction. Others notice how smoothly methods pass through the name change. Dispersed treasuries, disciplined brotherhood, guarded knowledge. They argue that regardless of charter, the continuity of practice is the point. This chapter's strange glint lies in the blanks, a chart with a white space where a bay should be, an account with a number missing and yet fully understood, a pilot who knows to turn when the bell strikes twice, because the bell is the compass. It is the same old language, spoken in a new dialect. What looks like absence is, again, instruction. One asks the usual questions, harder now for being at sea. If a state adopts the craft of secrecy once honed by an order, is that not a kind of inheritance? If a maritime office keeps a master map that no one may copy whole, is that not the library's Null map reborn with tides? If sailors carry routes in their heads and sing them into memory, does the oath not echo in their throats? A caravel takes the wind. Ropes snap. Canvas fills. The Red Cross climbs the night like a second moon. On the quarterdeck, a pilot touches the rail twice, waiting for the harbor bell to answer. When it does, the ship eases outward, not so much leaving as vanishing, each turn hidden among turns that look the same. On the pier, a crate bears an imprint of rose and acacia thumbed into pitch. The mark softens, then disappears under salt. Far away, in a monastery, a friar writes of a fleet that sails as shadow. Later still, in Bavaria, officials open a storeroom and find papers, stamps, and signs, none certain in meaning, all suggestive. Between these scenes runs a coast road that maps cannot truly hold, a way of safeguarding power by teaching it to look like nothing at all. The wind freshens. The caravel's wake scribbles briefly on black water and then unwrites itself. If a ledger can be hidden behind a wall and a route can be hidden inside a false chart, what else can be carried forward under new names? If methods wear different emblems but produce the same silence, where does inheritance end and reinvention begin? Here the questions overlap like waves. Is the Red Cross on the wind a continuity of symbol or a clever reuse? Are the blanks on charts a trick of statecraft born from trade rivalry, or the seaborne cousin of the map without ink? Does this coastal chapter show how the vow traveled, or only how quickly power learns from whatever works? Lanterns dwindle along the quay. The bell tolls once more. A pilot shutters the chart room, and for a moment the compass rose. On the table resembles a flower pressed in an old book, a memory kept flat against time. The room grows still. Wax cools. In the quiet, the sea breathes like stone. As the ship's light fades into the horizon, the thread we have been following draws tight. from ledger to fleet, from market to library, from letter to edict, and now from shore to open water, the same method hums beneath different names. The embers of it do not go out. They glow behind symbols and under sails, asking us to decide what exactly survives. The bell's echo thins into the night, and with it the line between practice and legend. Out of that thinning comes what must follow next. Not another scene, but the attempted answers. Hypotheses that try to name the current we have been feeling all along, and to say whether it is river or myth or both. The smoke of the candle curls upward, dissolving into questions. We have followed the Templar vow through hidden ledgers, vanished ships, maps without ink, and margins in forgotten libraries, and a red cross carried on the wind. We have seen it resurface in a friar's letter and in the symbols of the Illuminati. But what does it all mean? How should we interpret these fragments? Historians and storytellers divide into three main paths. Each offers a different answer to the central riddle. Did the Templars truly survive? And if so, in what form? The first hypothesis is bold. It claims that the Illuminati of 1776 was not a new creation at all, but the latest mask of an order centuries old. According to this view, the Templars survived their arrest by retreating underground, carrying their symbols, vows, and methods forward until they emerged in Enlightenment Bavaria. The facts lend this idea some weight. The Templars relied on oaths, codes, and secrecy to safeguard wealth across Europe. The Illuminati also used oaths, signs, and hidden hierarchies to protect their members and their ideas. Both societies bound themselves with vows to brotherhood, to work, and to balance. The unusual detail is the report from 1785 when Bavarian officers raided a storeroom and found carved emblems, a red cross, and an unfinished eye. To some, this is proof. The Templar cross standing beside the eye that would later symbolize the Illuminati. Coincidence or continuity? Critics argue the evidence is thin. There are nearly 5 centuries between 1307 and 1776. Where are the documents, the names, the direct line? Without them, how can we say inheritance is real? They suggest the similarities are inevitable. Any secret society will evolve oaths and signs. So the question remains, when two distant orders look alike, are we seeing family resemblance? Or are we simply seeing the same tools reinvented? The second hypothesis focuses less on lineage and more on infrastructure. It suggests that what survived of the Templars was not the order itself, but their system of trust. The Templars created international credit long before banks. They taught merchants to move wealth through codes, gestures, and ledgers hidden in plain sight. When the order fell, this network did not die. It continued through guilds, leagues, and merchant families, shaping later fraternities that gave rise to the Illuminati. The fact here is undeniable. Templars revolutionized finance. Their letters of credit allowed pilgrims to travel safely, and kings themselves relied on Templar loans. The unusual detail lies in the map without ink. Market gestures, spacing in ledgers, bells as signals. These became the invisible infrastructure of trust. In ports, emblems of a sun over waves hinted at hidden exchanges. Such practices could easily flow forward into other networks, carrying secrecy as habit rather than legend. But the critics push back. Other groups also developed codes: Venetian traders, Hanseatic merchants, Masonic lodges. Why attribute everything to the Templars? Perhaps these methods were simply natural adaptations to commerce. Yet the question lingers. If a culture of trust survives in practice, does it not keep the vow alive, even if the name is lost? Could Weishaupt's Illuminati have been less an heir to the Templars themselves and more an heir to the methods the Templars pioneered? The third hypothesis is perhaps the most paradoxical. It suggests that what truly survived was not men or methods, but myth. The Templars' hidden ledgers, their vanished fleet, their maps without ink, whether true or not, became legends powerful enough to shape later societies. The Illuminati, by adopting these myths, gained the aura of ancient power, even if no real inheritance existed. The fact is that the Templars' fall in 1307 immediately gave rise to stories. Chronicles whispered of treasure smuggled away, of ships disappearing into the Atlantic, of vows carried underground. The unusual detail is the persistence of one phrase. The fleet has no flag but its own shadow. From La Rochelle to the Friar's letter in 1400 2, the motif recurs, carrying a sense of survival. By 1776, the legend of Templar secrecy was so deeply rooted that any society borrowing it could claim ancient ancestry. Critics argue this is nothing more than illusion. Myth is not proof of continuity, but others counter. If men believe in a myth, act upon it, organize around it, then the myth becomes real in its consequences. Did the Illuminati inherit the Templars? Or did they simply inherit the story of the Templars? And was that enough? Three hypotheses remain. Some hear an unbroken line from Templars to Illuminati. Others see a merchant web whose methods of secrecy outlived the order. And some say the myth itself carried the vow forward until belief became its own kind of truth. Which do you find most convincing? The carved cross and eye in Bavaria, the subtle codes of trade, or the persistence of legend? Perhaps the truth is some mixture of all three. Perhaps the vow survived as fragments, symbols here, methods there, stories everywhere, and together they created the echo we now call the Illuminati. The smoke fades, the embers cool. We return to the chamber beneath Paris, where the red cross and the unfinished eye gleam once more in the lamplight. Their meaning remains uncertain, but their presence undeniable. And in that uncertainty, we prepare to rest. We return at last to the hidden chamber beneath Paris. The lamp burns low, its flame trembling against the stone. On the wall, the red cross and the unfinished eye glow faintly, side by side, as they have throughout our journey. We have traced their echoes, the ledger hidden beneath stone, the fleet that may have vanished from La Rochelle, the invisible map drawn in markets, the margins of books that whispered transactions, the letter of 1492, the Illuminati of 1776, the edicts of 1784-85. Each fragment raised the same question. Did the Templar vow survive? Think about what we have seen. If a vow is carried in memory, can it ever be destroyed? If a map is written in gestures, can it ever be seized? If a story is powerful enough, can it become truth by belief alone? Perhaps this is the lesson. Gold can be stolen, castles can fall, orders can be banned, but vows spoken in silence can outlast them all. The rose closes its petals, the acacia keeps its evergreen leaves, and the oath to the brotherhood, to the work, to the balance, continues, whether in men, in methods, or in myth. So I ask you directly, what do you believe survived? Was it the order itself, hidden beneath centuries of masks? Was it the methods of secrecy, passed from merchant to merchant, lodge to lodge? Or was it the story, the legend of survival, that became the vessel, carrying their spirit into the Illuminati and beyond? The lamp sputters, the wax pools, the chamber darkens, yet the symbols still glimmer faintly as if waiting for you to decide their meaning. Listen closely. The city above is silent. The stone beneath your feet feels steady. A bell tolls in the distance, its sound fading like breath. The chamber exhales, as though history itself is ready to rest. You may never know the full truth. None of us will. But perhaps that is the beauty of it. Some mysteries are meant to remain unfinished, like the eye carved in stone, left open, never closed. Its incompleteness invites us to wonder, and in that wonder, the vow continues. The flame bends, shrinks, and fades. Darkness fills the chamber. Only the echo of the bell remains, soft and slow, calling you into stillness. And so, gentle listener, let the mystery rest with you tonight. If you wish to explore more hidden corridors of history, linger with us here in Serene Myths. There are more maps without ink, more vows whispered in silence, waiting for another night. For now, close your eyes. Breathe with the rhythm of the stone. Let the cross and the eye fade into shadow, and sleep, knowing that history's greatest secrets keep their watch in silence.